theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Good afternoon, Suzy Wrong.
Hello, Warren. This week's movie about a school teacher reminded me of the time when I was finishing my Bachelor of Arts degree at uni and I considered becoming a teacher.
Oh, did you?
I did. I was worried about the Bachelor of Arts not helping me get a job anywhere. So I thought one of the realistic things is to become a teacher. But I just couldn't handle more time at uni, so it didn't go ahead.
I reckon you'd be a great teacher, Suzy. Honestly, I reckon you'd be really good. You'd be very patient with everyone.
Probably. Well, that was when a long time ago. I was a much younger person. I don't know, but I was thinking, how hard it is to transition if you had already begun work as a teacher. And I sort of Googled a bit and I saw that your rights are protected. Like, I think in Australia you can't get fired unless it's a religious school. That is another conversation. You can't get fired for your gender and sexuality. But still, I can imagine how hard it is. Like if in the middle, because most people join that profession in their 20s fairly young, and if in their 30s they discover that, oh, you know what, I really need to do this. But because there's so many forces in that sort of environment that's going to work against you. That's what I thought when I saw this movie, really.
I wonder what the parents would be like, because I can imagine you get, I don't know, if there's any teachers, get in touch, please, 0427 569 949. But I imagine that, I'd find the parents the most difficult to deal with, I think. The kids I'd be okay with, but the parents, I'd feel like I'd go away. Honestly, I'd find them so annoying if they were closed-minded. What do we say, narrow-minded, Suzy? You and I don't know, I'd find it really frustrating.
I think if I'm putting myself in that position, just everyone, the students, the parents, and all the staff at school, I think there is a different code, because you kind of have to be a bit more careful, I believe, because you sort of have young people around, and there's this culture of being extra, what's a word, like, it just looks like it's meant to be a very wholesome environment, and then trans people are just not, are not considered wholesome. It is wrong, but I think that's how we think about this whole business of transitioning.
Do you think, though, Suzy, I reckon you'd be a fabulous teacher. I mean, if I had kids and Suzy Wrong was teaching them, I'd be so thrilled. I'd be like, oh my goodness, the best teacher in the world. It's fantastic. Do you reckon most parents would say, you know what, Suzy's a great teacher? Or do you think they'd look at the trans side of things and put that above whether you're a good teacher or not?
I think some people have such strong prejudices against things that facts don't matter, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we face in the current climate. Like we try to argue over facts, and some people just can't shift their mindset. They get fixated on myths and just falsities, and they can't accept truth for what it is, and that's hard. And also, you say that I'm a good teacher only because you've known me for quite a few years now. But for people who don't know me from a bar of soap, they would have preconceived notions of me. Even though I'm not a teacher, people would see me on the street. People who can identify me as a trans person, they might have preconceived notions. That's because they don't know me. And the people at schools, I don't think they have the all that leisure of that privilege of people understanding who they are and then having the space to transition.
It's not those who don't know you from a bar of soap, those who don't know you from an expensive bottle of body moisturising, body wash.
Thank you. That's a nice compliment.
Luke in Winter just texts in and says, I grew up on a very small town in rural Victoria during the 1980s and AIDS crisis. Being gay was impossible. No one was gay at the time. Being called gay was the worst slur in the world. You could be set upon and bashed. I was not out. Guys had to play football. If you didn't, you were, and I won't say what the word that Luke said then. Back then, that was not good. My safe place was The library. I went to Melbourne the moment I finished HSC. Still scares me to go back. Luke, thank you so much for sending in that comment. Isn't it funny? I think the library was a safe place for a lot of us. It certainly was for me in getting out of sport. Was it for you, Suzy?
The safe space that came to mind when you brought up this topic was the internet, the early internet, the early chat rooms. Do you remember?
Yes.
Before there was direct messaging, there was chat rooms for lonely souls.
Yes, I remember them.
Yeah.
And then someone would pick up the other line in the other room and you'd get disconnected. But you're right.
I meant the internet chat rooms. Yeah, I was really... right, you mean the internet connection, yeah. It was really addictive. I found it, and it was very early in my transition experience, and being able to find a chat room with trans people and their quote-unquote admirers from all around the world gave me all this information that wasn't available anywhere. Like we didn't have a lot of books printed about us, published about us, and there certainly wasn't anything in journalism. And I knew that we existed, but it was only through these chat rooms that I was able to encounter people overseas who mainly overseas who were living trans lives, and gave me so much information. And it was hard for me to kind of really make sense of my own life at that stage. I was still fairly young in my 20s. I wasn't fully acknowledging that it was going to be my experience, but these people made me so comfortable. For many months, I didn't understand why I kept going to the room. It was weird. Now I'm looking back, I'm like, of course you went back to the room. They were all your people. But for some reason, I stumbled on the room. I just found myself so comfortable in there. I was curious about their lives, and then learned about myself without that, that initial intention to.
Suzy, imagine if it was pre-internet times and you didn't have the chat room. I mean, what would you have done then?
Yeah, I've experienced that. Before the 90s when there was no internet chats. And I think that was why for many years I lived as a gay man, because there was reporting, obviously negative reporting in the press about gay people. And then, but from the West, there were some positive portrayals in Hollywood films, in English language films. I was able to see that gay people existed, and because it was the closest thing that I could identify with, so I thought I was a gay man for many years. It just shows how important that sort of example, you're not necessarily role models, but just an example, the idea of what life could look like, how important that is.
Morgan in Fitzroy North says, funny enough, the local comic bookstore was my safe space. The owner was queer and it became an unofficial meeting spot. That's a really nice, safe place. And also, Alex in St Kilda says, the Peel was my first ever gay club. And I remember just standing there feeling like I could finally breathe. We know that feeling, don't we?
Yeah, bookstores and clubs, they were really central to queer life before the internet.
This one here, Jordan says, this is a good one. I was too scared to go to actual queer spaces. So my safe space was sitting in my car listening to Joy.
Oh.
Isn't that funny?
That's special.
I suppose Joy was my safe space too before it actually started going to air, was being involved in setting it up, was I could go there and I could be amongst, people that I felt safe
What a
with.
great legacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love it. Another one comes in and says, Marcus says Club 80, a hidden gem where you could be yourself without fear. R.I.P. Yes, long gone now. Club 80. Good old Club 80. Suzy, we are talking about Blue Jean. It's on SBS On Demand. We'd love to know what your safe space was. 0427 569 949. Suzy, give us your review.
It was 1988 when the Thatcher government instituted Section 28, a controversial ban on local authorities from, quote, promoting the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship, end quote. This law stayed in effect for 12 years, and in the movie Blue Jean, streaming on SBS On Demand, we observe how Jean, a high school PE teacher, suffered the consequences of Section 28. In private, Jean is a woman woman trying to establish a happy life as a young lesbian in Newcastle, England. But at work, she's deep in the closet, constantly threatened by the possibility of being outed and therefore losing her job, as well as being socially humiliated. Thatcher had made official an atmosphere of homophobia in public institutions, and at Jean's school, both teachers and students behave in ways that are unabashedly discriminatory, emboldened by the Prime Minister's endorsement of prejudice. Lois is a 15-year-old student targeted by bullies for being queer, but Jean does little to help, terrified that it would reveal her own sexual identity. Written and directed by Georgia Oakley, who coincidentally was born in 1988, the film Blue Jean is a stylish and sensitive look back at an important point in queer English history. It is a quiet film that reflects the austere isolation experienced by the likes of Jean, whose miserable, closeted existence stands in striking contrast against the rest of her community, which is going through a period of unprecedented emancipation. Outside, the queers are politically activated, but at school, Jean is suffering the effects of a backlash by the Conservative government. The film may be a little too cool for school, but even though it's not a highly emotional piece of drama, it's certainly thought-provoking. We think about how things have been and how things may be different or indeed similar today. Warren, do you think homophobia has changed through the years, or is it pretty much the same thing?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like it's pretty much the same thing. I was reading today about Thatcher's Conservative Party's conference speech. I think it was 1987. And she made a speech that I suppose many saw as reinforcing anti-LGBTQ plus sentiments, particularly in education. This is what she said. She said, and I quote, "Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated," unquote. I mean, just think about it, Suzy. I mean, I get chills thinking about that. Don't these people think that they are cheating these children of their right to be themselves, which is a sound start in life? I just can't believe it. I remember Margaret Thatcher. Horrible policies. Horrible, absolutely horrible. Her policies saying that, that they shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, or promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. Just shocking.
Those words sound so ridiculous
Don't
now.
they? But they were the words, and it was only 1988.
I'm thinking back to just, just a few years ago, like people like Scott Morrison and all those who were opposing the referendum, but not using these words, but we knew exactly that they were thinking these things, like they were much more measured in their language. And I feel like maybe that's what's happened. Like people have learned to be more measured with their language, not be so kind of explicitly vicious now. But I think the sentiment is probably pretty much the same thing.
Maybe. And like the other thing too, remember that we had the HIV/AIDS crisis during this time of Thatcher's government. And, I remember Thatcher's government being criticised for its slow response and its lack of funding for public health initiatives for HIV and AIDS. I mean, I remember reading that at the time and thinking to myself, they're happy for these people to die of HIV and AIDS. They're saying that they're not worthy of having the assistance and the help. That's a pretty strong thing for a leader of a country to do. And I know Ronald Reagan was exactly the same in the US. That's true.
Yeah, I think for the first many few years, I think that was the idea, that they will just kind of have really slow action, hoping that all the gays will die off and miraculously AIDS will die off with it. And when it became clear that straight people were getting infected really, really quickly by that stage, they weren't able to ignore it anymore. There is that part of society that just wishes to have a homogeneity to how we live, and hence make America great again. That's the sort of idea, this imaginary past when things they imagined things were nicer and easier because there was no difference, even though we have always existed.
We've been chatting about Blue Jean, which captures the fear of being outed in a time when being openly queer could cost you your job. And we want to know, what was your safe place? This one has come in. Renee says from Paran, my local women's soccer team. I love this. We all knew, but no one said anything. It was just understood. And often, Suzy, I think of those places where nothing was said, but it was okay. It was almost like a sigh of relief. Everyone knew. Do you remember that?
Yeah. For me, it was a really interesting place. I had mentioned maybe once or twice before of serving my Singapore National Service for like 2 years and 9 months, to a fairly long time.
That's long.
I had auditioned early on to be in a performance group within the army, and was able to serve my time there. And part of it was that they would allow national service men to go there if they've determined that they have some talent, but also that they wouldn't be more useful elsewhere. And if you are identifiably queer, that would be one of the reasons for them thinking that you wouldn't be more useful elsewhere. So I ended up with this performance group there, and obviously because it was an armed forces organization, you could not be too overt with your queer behavior, even though you were surrounded by queer people. But obviously in private, we knew exactly who were the straight ones and who were the queer ones.
This one's coming from Joss, actually, saying, I found Blue Jean really hard to watch, especially Jean's sister's views about her sexuality. I hope we never, ever have to return to those sorts of times, but it looks like my trans siblings in the US are facing this same hateful rhetoric already. It's sad that we have to keep on fighting over and over and over again. Glad I watched it, though. It's a timely reminder now of how far we've come, and a reminder of why it's so important to maintain the gains that we have made. Thank you, Joss, for sending that in. Another one in from Chris in Ballarat says, I lived in a tiny country town, so my safe queer space was literally a Yahoo chat room, which is what you were saying too before, Suzy.
Yeah. I think we've forgotten that because messaging has turned into a different beast now. And, with social media taking on a different kind of identity. But back then it was real time, wasn't it? And you all had to be in the room, and there would be like 10 chats going on in the same room.
Very busy.
It was, yeah. There were parts of it that were really embarrassing thinking back, but I know for sure how much it helped me in a way, like I said earlier, that in a way that there was nothing else in existence that was able to help me. Yeah.
Rowan says, it sounds weird, but the gay section at Borders bookstore, I just stand there reading, pretending I belonged. Oh, that's so sad, having to pretend that you belong when we should belong to somewhere.
I wonder if those things happen. I know in Singapore, there used to be swimming pools, right? Because there weren't gay bars. And swimming pools are one of those things where gay men would pick each other up. I never experienced those things myself, but I knew that to be like quite a big part of Singaporean gay culture. And that makes me think if they're still around, if they're still
in Singapore,
I wonder if there's still, what do you call it? Cottaging activities in Singapore swimming pools.
I might go to Singapore for a swim, Suzy.
You should do a bit of investigative journalism.
Shouldn't I? We could do it. I would love to. Suzy, one more here. This is from Leo saying, a makeshift queer book club in a friend's garage. We all pretended it was about literature. There's a lot of pretending going on, isn't there?
There is a lot of pretending. Yeah. That's a very big part of our history. Obviously we don't think that it is the same now, but I suspect that there might still be bits of that around.
Absolutely. Suzy Wrong, we've been talking about Blue Jean. You can catch it now on SBS On Demand. Suzy, you picked the song for this week, which of course is New Order, Blue Monday. Why'd you pick that?
because it was played in the clubs in the movie, and it's just one of the most fantastic songs. And I don't know if New Order has gay members. I'm not sure, but some of those tunes are just so kind of symbolic, right? That they represent so much of the gay clubs of the time.
And it's interesting because as soon as you hear them, it takes you right back. It takes me back to Mandate, which was here in St Kilda. I remember sneaking out in high school.
Yeah,
my best friend's window at night.
It's got that electro thumping drive that just feels like gay music.
Definitely. Suzy Wrong, what are we watching next week?
The Parenting is a comedy horror film on Binge. Boyfriends Josh and Rohan plan a weekend getaway to introduce their parents, only to discover that their rental is home to a 400-year-old poltergeist. We'll find out if The Parenting on Binge is any good when I see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Suzy Wrong, and you can catch Blue Jean, SBS On Demand. Here's New Order, Blue Monday on Drive.